BBC Radio Wales to give my opinion on a news story that is getting a lot of prominence at the moment. The Professor William Schultz from Cambridge University has published recommendations based on his research into colour and the way that the brain responds to particular colours. In his report, William Schultz suggests that the manufacturers of fatty foods should not use certain colours on their packaging because certain colours such as yellows, oranges and reds have a subliminal trigger on the brain which will create a desire for these things, and actually in the face of public health and having record highs of obesity, he says it is a public responsibility to ensure that we change how these are packaged. One thing that I will absolutely agree with is that colour is fundamental and instinctive. As humans, we are able to perceive colour and form of things far sooner than we will pick up on things like the branding, reading the words, what kind of item it is, or photography and imagery of other types. It's the reason actually that lots of us are caught out when we go to the supermarket and we're often duped and come home to discover we haven't bought the brand that we intended. We have bought one that is an own brand version that has been very cleverly packaged in very similar colours. So for example, you might see Marmite and recognise the jar in the kind of dark brown with the yellow lid and the red on the label, and you may see one beside it with very similar but slightly different packaging, obviously not called Marmite, called yeast extract, but when you scan the shelf you associate the objects, whether you then buy in a hurry and don't realise you bought the wrong one, or consciously think, well, this is very similar goods because it looks the same but is cheaper and I will buy that. They have essentially managed to convince you by drawing you in using the similar colours and packaging. The colour psychologist Karen Heller actually says that up to 85% of our initial recognition and perception of a brand or item comes from its colour alone. So that's very powerful. We're only leaving 15% in that first impression for anything else. So I want to just look at one colour which is mentioned in the report, which is yellow. So traditionally speaking, in colour psychology terms, the colour is known to be uplifting, to excite. Depending on different reports, it's also suggested to be optimistic or encourage creativity. And I think when you look at it, even from a kind of soft science point of view, you understand where those connections have come from. But I think one thing that's very important for us to bear in mind when we look at this kind of science and the conclusions drawn from it, that we need to allow for context. So for example, if I take this yellow and I put it beside this blue, then we have Sweden or we have IKEA. If I take this yellow and I put it beside this red, bear with me, then we've got some McDonald's going on there. And if I was to put it beside green, it would probably look like a buttercup. So I think what's very important is that we bear in mind that colours do have an impact, but we realise that they are not completely isolated, and the context of colours in which they appear, the form of packaging and how they're used is also very important. The other point I would make is in the report, William Schultz draws on these colours, suggesting that these colours excite and create a desire to buy these foods which are unhealthy. When we look across the certain brands that are famously known for kind of advertising and creating foods that aren't healthy for us, I'm just going to take for this example Burger King, McDonald's and Coca-Cola. And across those three especially. Notice that red is used in all but Coca-Cola. Yellow is used. So red, yellow, black, these colours are actually very instinctive core colours, especially white, black and red are considered life colours. They're the colours of life, death, blood. But also when paired with yellow, the yellow almost becomes a little bit hyped by the red. So yellow is no longer something that we could see as natural or optimistic. It suddenly becomes quite charged and very energetic, very attention grabbing. But it's precisely for those reasons that road signs use red, white and black, or often red and yellow with black for our road signs to alert us for danger. So I would challenge the idea that these colours create a natural desire for food or indulgence, because actually I think really what's happening is they're just grabbing the attention, but it's actually a bit of an assault of the senses in many ways. I've got my colour book here with me with beautiful examples of branding, and they go through all different colours, and I was just scanning through this and looking at the yellows, and obviously they're all different types of tone and they're used for different products and different types of businesses, but none of these images make me feel in the least bit kind of appetized. In fact, a lot of the usages don't feel warm at all. The yellow is almost like a bumblebee. It's got very, very sharp, edgy, kind of zesty quality. And it makes me think of Selfridges. And again, you know, they use that in a very kind of fashion forward, very outstanding, noticeable way, but it does not make me think in any way of sort of comfort or appetite. So that's interesting. The other thing I'd say to that end is that I think that with the kind of huge trend in clean eating, actually certain shoppers, if you were to survey them or maybe do an experiment to kind of track their purchase habits, would be drawn to completely the opposite end of the colour spectrum. So I think that we are influenced by what we see, and we are influenced by advertising and brands and campaigns. But actually, if you have got an Instagram feed full of beautifully, brightly lit salads with avocado and pomegranate seeds, and smoothies with spinach and mango sliced up beautifully, you're likely to actually be drawn to colours that are fresh. You might even be drawn to green or blue or purples and whites, colours that actually traditionally are not connected with the idea of food and appetizing. In fact, I know that green and blue are a bit of a no-no for food packaging, unless it's like a mint-based product. So I think that it'd be interesting to see where things go in the next few years. Plain packaging does not necessarily make something unappetizing. So it's unclear from the report whether they suggest that actually if you were to go into a McDonald's and you order your cheeseburger and fries, that they then get served to you in plain packaging, or whether actually this is more about not going into a restaurant and buying something from a brand you know, and actually trialing a new brand in the supermarket based on how it's packaged. I mean, in that example of McDonald's, I'd say, you know, this is not going to solve the problem, because if you have a very well-established fast food brand like that, it has an appeal and people know what they're doing, really. What I would say is that if you suddenly start serving people their chips in just a plain brown package rather than the kind of iconic red and yellow little semicircle cup, you're going to see some people a bit disappointed. You're going to see some people not notice, and I would say you're not going to make much of an impact, because people have already decided to go into that restaurant. They know the brand and they've walked in through the door. So unless the whole thing is going to be a plain cover operation with no advertising, you know, plain billboards, you know, I don't think we're going to really create change here. On the other hand, if we walk into a supermarket and we see things in plain wrapping, they're wrapped up in the same way as the cigarette box changed this year, then yes, you're going to see a drop-off. If you put crazy health warnings in a very universal and unattractive font across everything, then it's not appealing to buy. The things with the photography are going to lure you more, especially considering people do shop after work and they shop emotively, people want something nice for dinner, so I would say you'd see a drop off there, but I can't see any brands that would be willing to do that, because it basically goes against all the fundamentals of how to market your brand. There are several brands that are successfully using plain packaging, and actually across the board they're premium. So you see in the dessert section, you'll see things like bread and butter puddings or chia seed and coconut yogurts, and sometimes they're in glass jars with greaseproof paper or traditional kind of craft paper to cover them with beautiful brown labelling. And again, another ready meal brand is Cara Bendon. They just use little kind of plywood boxes or sometimes ceramic dishes that you can keep afterwards with just greaseproof paper and simple brown packaging, or just plain white with a pale blue watercolour wash label with a hand signature. And I think there is a huge re-emergence in the popularity of more traditional values, especially when it comes to food. People are becoming more and more foodie, and the idea that something is wrapped up that looks like it's homemade rather than looks like it's been, in a shipment overnight, is very appealing. It can't be underestimated. So I'd like to just counter the idea that plain packaging is not attractive. If we do want to use our knowledge of colour and how it can affect people's purchasing habits, then we have to think smarter than just applying it to the packaging. I mean, if we really wanted to create change, we would need to see the really big boys in this fast food industry changing their whole tack in terms of their advertising, their promotion, their storefronts, their fit outs, to reflect this. That's highly unlikely. I can't see Coca-Cola willing to shed its iconic red anytime soon. I can't see much incentive for them, although all of these retailers, especially McDonald's, have been pushing very hard over the last few years to promote that their ingredients are fresh, that they have low-calorie options, etc. So a more realistic thing, I think, is a couple of brands that I've noticed that do things well. Tesco has introduced that every child can have a free piece of fruit when they come in to the store to keep them occupied. It's right by the very front of the store. It's got a big point of sale, and it's targeted just at children, so that's really good because, it's usually chocolate brands or crisp brands that will invest in that kind of point of sale. Also, memorably, a couple of years ago in France, a supermarket chain did a really great campaign where they tried to promote the fruits and vegetables that would normally be thrown away for not conforming with the kind of shape ideals and colour ideals that are used in selecting fresh produce for supermarkets. We all have a really clear idea of an apple, whether you think of a crisp Granny Smith that's green, or you think of a gala apple that's rosy and has a bit of shine to it. We expect to see those things when we go shopping, and if we see something that is, deformed or a different colour, too small, too large, very different shape from being round, we'll generally not select it. And that's partly because it's partly instinctive, but actually a huge amount of it is due to the images that we're exposed to that tell us that is what a healthy apple looks like. So it's our brain trying to figure out the most healthy and best produce. Then they brought in sampling where they had made smoothies and soups using these, and they put great big signage out owning the fact that these were ugly fruit. They really branded it. They created this incredibly bold and funny point of sale, and I think really it was the sampling that changed people's perception. After they did this, they sold out. And it might sound like one exception, but I really think that what's happened here is they've cleverly used people's perceptions and ideas of food, and they've used the types of marketing that they know would provoke, and then they've disproved that, and it's very clever. Now, for us to really create a huge change in our perception of foods is an ongoing thing that will take several years. But I really congratulate the people that came up with initiatives like this, because I think, regardless of colour, they were using all the resources available to them that they knew were provocative, calling it ugly fruit, etc. And they turned it on its head. So I hope that you found this interesting, and it's a little bit longer than my original Welsh interview, because in the last couple of days I kept thinking of the things that were really important, and goodness knows there's so much more. Colour and colour psychology is a fascinating area, but I hope that this has caused you to think about colour, and I challenge you to just look out and see what you're attracted to next time you go shopping.